Hi, I'm Steve. You can call me Steve. A guy goes to Jasper National Park in the Canadian Rockies. He goes to a restaurant high up a mountain and orders poached eggs. The waiter says, "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't serve poached eggs." "Why not?" "Poaching isn't allowed in national parks." This may or may not be a true story, and it may or may not have happened in Jasper. I cannot dig up the original reference where I first read it. There's more to it than just a lame pun, though, and the waiter isn't just being a jerk. It's hard to boil an egg on top of a mountain. And to understand that, we need to talk about how boiling works and how eggs work. When you have a sample of water, say sitting in a pan, it's not staying put. Some of the water molecules leave the water and float into the air above it. We call this evaporation. The warmer the water is, the more molecules evaporate. Because this vapor is a gas, it has pressure. It presses on the things around it. The more vapor there is, the higher the pressure. This is true for all liquids, but I'm going to concentrate on water. However, the atmosphere has a pressure too, and it's pressing down on the water. You can imagine it as trying to keep the water from evaporating. It's a contest of strength, and the water is losing. The atmospheric pressure is greater than the vapor pressure of the water.
However, when you heat the water up, you start to tip the balance in the water's favor. The vapor pressure increases until it matches the atmospheric pressure of the air above it. Now things are equal and the water starts boiling. When it was evaporating, water molecules were only coming off the surface. Now that it's boiling, the molecules are flashing into the gas phase from the bulk liquid. That's what those bubbles are.
We call the temperature at which this occurs the boiling point. People say water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but really pedantic people say it boils at 100 degrees at sea level. Why? It has to do with air pressure. Remember, it's a trial of strength, and the higher up you go, the weaker the air is. The density of the atmosphere is highest at the bottom, where it touches the ocean, and it gets less dense the farther away from the bottom you go, i.e. higher up. As the density decreases, the number of air molecules bouncing around decreases, which means there are fewer of them pressing down on the water. This in turn means you need fewer water molecules in the vapor phase to equal the air pressure, which requires less heat, which means water boils at a lower temperature. The thing is, once water reaches this temperature and starts boiling, it stays at that temperature. You can't heat a liquid past its boiling point. Any extra heat you put in goes towards converting the molecules from liquid to gas, not heating them up. This will be a lot more meaningful in a minute. Okay, now eggs. When you cook an egg, it goes from runny and raw to solid-ish. There are a bunch of different ways of cooking eggs in water. You boil them or poach them or whatever, but they all involve the application of heat. Egg white, that runny whitish stuff, is a protein called albumin, which is derived from the Latin word for white. These names are not just meaningless syllables. Proteins are made up of huge chains of building blocks called amino acids, and this chain is folded into a little blob which has a certain shape that's optimized for whatever job it does. When you heat a protein, you change the way it folds, which changes its properties. When that happens, we say the protein has been denatured. Most methods of cooking proteins like eggs or meat involve denaturing them in some way. There's a threshold temperature at which this starts to occur. At room temperature, the egg stays raw. But at this threshold temperature, the runny, whitish albumin turns into opaque, rubbery cooked egg. If I liked eggs at all, I'd probably have some in the apartment to demonstrate this, but I don't. So you get me talking about how unappetizing eggs are. Okay, so we've got an egg, which requires a certain minimum temperature to cook. We've got a pot of water, which has a certain maximum temperature it can't go beyond, which varies with air pressure. You can see where I'm going with this. As we take that pot higher and higher up a mountain, the air pressure drops, and so does the boiling point of the water. There comes a point where it drops below the cooking temperature of the egg. We can leave it on the stove all we want, but the water will not get hot enough to denature the albumin and cook the egg. If you really want eggs up that mountain, you'll have to have them prepared in a way that doesn't involve boiling water. Thanks for watching. I've been Steve.